Welcome, everyone. We are thrilled to have you joining us for Green Amendments, a paradigm shift in environmental justice and protection, a Waterside Chat with veteran environmentalist Maya K. Van Rossum. Before we begin, can you please give me a thumbs up or nod your head if you can hear me okay? Can you hear me? Great. Thank you. So just a few reminders, we are going to be recording this chat and we'll upload it to our YouTube channel shortly afterwards. Please remember to mute your microphones upon entering, and there will be question and answer time after the chat, so you can submit your questions into the chat box on Zoom, or you can just ask them during the Q&A. Okay, so my name is Rachel Dawn Davis, and I am the Public Policy and Justice Organizer for Water Spirit. I am joined today by my colleagues Blair Nelson, Executive Director, and Abby Koshak, Program Manager, also at Water Spirit. And for those of you who don't know, Water Spirit is a nonpartisan, nonprofit center for spiritual ecology, sponsored by the Sisters of St. Joseph of Peace. So if you could, actually feel free to take a minute to share in the chat if you feel so inclined. I'm going to put a link here. On what Native American land are you zooming in from? I am zooming in from occupied Lenni Lenape land.
While Rachel's internet returns to her, please go ahead and open that link that she pointed us to if you can, and type in the chat whose land you're occupying.
Thank you, Blair, and sorry for my spotty internet, which will happen periodically. But for now, if we could please take a moment to be silent for the helpers, namely the water protectors everywhere. Okay, thank you, everyone. So Maya is a protector, and you can be too, whether you're listening here live or on our recording. Today, we have the pleasure of chatting with, as I said, Maya K. Van Rossum. Thank you so much for being our guest today. I want to share a little bit about Maya, for those of you who don't know. She's the founder of Green Amendments for the Generations, a grassroots nonprofit organization inspiring a nationwide movement to secure constitutional recognition and protection of environmental rights in every state and ultimately at the federal level. She has served as the Delaware Riverkeeper and leader for the Delaware Riverkeeper since 1994. The role of the Delaware Riverkeeper is to give the Delaware River and the communities that depend on it and appreciate it a voice at every decision-making table that could provide help or do harm. And that's how I met you, Maya. The Delaware Riverkeeper Network that Van Rossum leads is the only citizen action organization that works the entire length and breadth of the Delaware River and its watershed, speaking and working for both its protection and its restoration. She's an attorney, a mother, and a human being who holds much reverence for young people alive today and those to come. So in the Green Amendment, this book, forward, Mark Ruffalo pleads, what we desperately need today is a new strategy, one that recognizes two things, that our efforts to protect the environment to date, however well-meaning, are insufficient, and one that mobilizes the American people in common cause and common purpose. It is time to see a safe and clean environment, not just as a preference or a privilege, but as a fundamental right, to treat it with the same sanctity as the right of free speech. So again, welcome, Maya. And my first question to you is what is the Green Amendment?
Well, first off, I just want to thank you for inviting me here and for the incredible partnership of Water Spirit. You are such a phenomenal organization and movement yourself, and I so honor and respect and appreciate everything you do and the fact that we've come together ourselves in common cause for the earth, for the river, and also to advance this transformational shift in environmental protection. So thank you for that. So the Green Amendment movement, I mean, I think you've alluded to it a little bit, but just to really put a period on the end of the sentence is, you know, throughout the entirety of people's lives, they've learned about the truth that they have a lot of fundamental rights. They have the right to free speech and freedom of religion. They have private property rights. And while I hate to mention it, it is something that actually helps drive a lot of emotions. People have the right to bear arms, right? And can see in those particular rights how powerfully having those rights recognized and protected in the Bill of Rights section of our state and federal constitution makes sure that they are given the highest level of protection under the law that you can get here in the United States of America. And it's that Bill of Rights recognition that ensures that all government officials from day one of decision making are working to ensure that they do not advance actions, activities, or decisions that will infringe on those rights because they are Bill of Rights recognized and protected. Well, what a Green Amendment does is it puts in the Bill of Rights gives the same legal power and standing to the rights of all people, including future generations, to pure water, clean air, a stable climate, and a healthy environment. I think it is for many people, it is quite a shock to know that those other rights that I listed are given the highest standing under the law, and yet that basic fundamental human right that we all need to survive and thrive, the rights to clean water and clean air, a stable climate, and healthy environments, are nowhere in that Bill of Rights section across our nation, except in 2 states, Pennsylvania and Montana. And so again, a Green Amendment changes all that. And by putting in the Bill of Rights section of the Constitution the rights of all people to a healthy environment, we fundamentally shift and transform environmental protection in our nation. So it is as powerful for the environment as it is for those other rights that people hold dear.
Thank you so much, Maya. And another question that we have for you is, what inspired you to be involved in this type of work?
So I'm not quite sure. I think that it is just part of my nature. Mother Nature pulled me in very early on, and I think that that's because of my own mother, who at every twist and turn encouraged me to spend my time out in the natural world. And always encouraged me when I saw an injustice in the world to rise up and challenge it. And in terms of challenging injustice, she encouraged me by inspiring me, because I would watch her all the time and how she lived her life. Whenever she saw somebody disempowered or being taken advantage of, no matter what, my mother would be there to step in and do what was right. And so, my love for the earth and, the importance and value I place on trying to help give voice to the voiceless and defend those who are in need of defense. Along my life journey, the two of those came together. And I think the universe just honored me with, very early on in my career, the opportunity to serve as the Delaware Riverkeeper and be the voice of the Delaware River. And it is through that journey of protecting the Delaware River that I not only came to learn about how our current system of laws is fundamentally failing us, because it is more focused on permitting and managing pollution and degradation rather than preventing it. It is more focused on advancing environmental racism rather than avoiding it. But I also came to learn through that work, or envision through that work, the power and importance of this Green Amendment movement, and how giving constitutional recognition and protection to environmental rights could just fundamentally flip and transform all of that. So I think it's been a life journey, but I credit all the positives in my life to my beautiful mother, who unfortunately I have lost, but I was really blessed to have her.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And I share that with you too. My mother also, I told my husband when we moved here, I'm going to end up volunteering with the town in some way. I'm drawn to it because of what my mother did and all the community organizing that she did that I was sitting in on as a child. So I really do share that with you, and seeing that example is so important. So thank you for carrying that torch and for sharing it with your kids and for all kids in this entire country. I have a quick question. So on that piece of, how we need a green amendment because there have been legislative failures, how has legislative environmentalism failed communities across America, the national, state, and local levels?
So very literally, if you go and read pretty much any environmental protection law, it's focused on one of two things. One is mandating that government officials review and consider all of the environmental degradation and devastation that's going to result from the actions and activities that they're proposing. Review it. It doesn't mandate that they address the problem or they prevent it, just that they understand the level of devastation that they're about to inflict before they inflict it. The idea being that hopefully through that knowledge, you are inspiring government officials to do the right thing. Unfortunately, all too often they don't. Knowledge can be power, but in the political arena, all too often it becomes power for the other side, for the industries and their lobbyists and their political apologists. The other thing that our environmental laws do, and this is the majority of them, is after you've done that review and consideration, and perhaps even taken public input, it simply directs the government officials on what permit they should issue to manage the who, the when, the where, the pollution and degradation that they're going to allow to happen is going to happen. So again, it's focused on helping the harm happen and managing it, not from day one of decision making, requiring, mandating, inspiring, and ensuring that our government officials are focused first on preventing pollution and degradation. And if you have accepted pollution and degradation as a foregone conclusion before you've even started the decision-making process, then when it comes to environmental harm, you are doomed to failure because you are not focused on how to avoid the harm. And the truth is, if you have a law or a system of government that orients you on prevention first, you can and always will find a better path that will, more often than not, avoid the harm. And perhaps in a few situations, when you can't get to that place, severely and seriously reduce it, so much so that you are not devastating the lives of the environments and the people that are going to be impacted. And the other thing is, this transformational shift also necessarily, fundamentally, puts you on a path of not just avoiding environmental harm, but avoiding environmental racism and avoiding this horrifying path that so many governments are on, which is about how often can you sacrifice one community over and over and over, indigenous communities, Black communities, brown communities, right, communities of color, low income communities, immigrant communities, sacrifice them over and over in order to serve the goals and desires and needs of others. But if we do the shift, right, like not only are we preventing pollution, degradation, and harm, but we are also ending environmental racism and giving the kind of systemic reform for protecting people's rights that has been called for on other fronts in the context of, law enforcement and health and economics and more.
Wow. Yeah, you hit a lot of things that
I have a habit of doing that. I get so excited that people ask me a question, and I just get on a roll. And so I'm sorry for answering questions before they were asked, but I know you appreciate that because you, like me, see the interconnectedness of it all.
Absolutely. And I do recommend that everybody read the book. You do write about sacrifice zones, and I know you've been able to see them all throughout the country. And so I think that's really important, is because a lot of people don't see those things. And unfortunately, until you see something like that, I don't think you really can connect what's actually going on. And so I appreciate your traveling the country, during a pandemic, all throughout, covering, getting your research and insight and community organizing covered by PBS. Thank you for doing that. And thank you to them for lending you their cameras and microphone. But I will lead into this question, which does focus on economics. I want to read this quote from the Green Amendment book. At the local, regional, national, and global levels, environmental degradation acts as a drain on the economy. So I don't know if you know this, but I studied economics at Rutgers. And frankly, corporations and government are intended to focus on their specific costs and their specific benefits, leaving out externalities. And this is something that has baffled me since I was an undergrad. And then I went to graduate school and studied it even more, and was told that social costs and social benefits, they can't be put to money. Yes, they can. So I want to ask you, from the perspective of costs and benefits, can you talk about the externalities, the social benefits of a green amendment, including ecotourism, which is something that you mentioned in your book, as well as the social costs without one?
So I didn't know about your economic background, but I am going to hit you up on that because as you know, so much of the opposition against the Green Amendment really is about raising red herrings. And one of the red herrings is that when you better protect the environment, that you somehow will foist economic devastation, right, on communities, on states, on our nation, and on our world. And it's simply not true. Time and time again, facts, research, and experience has proven when you have better environmental protection, you have better job creation and better economic development, right? A healthy economy is actually dependent upon a healthy environment. They are not just not mutually exclusive, but they are interconnected. And so, from an economic perspective, there are actually so many pathways to come at it. First off, in terms of community economic values, when you invest in healthy approaches to economic development, industry development, energy creation, invest in those pathways that accomplish your goal and protect the environment at the same time, very often you actually end up creating more jobs for communities. For example, on the energy front, it has been shown that for every $1 million invested in clean renewable energy options versus dirty fossil fuels, you create 3 to 5 times the number of jobs, right? So you get the jobs you need, you get more jobs, you create the energy you need, and you avoid environmental pollution and degradation. When we advance economic development in a way that is supportive of environmental health, we avoid the costs of the harm. Community costs as well as individual costs as well as family costs. So you can imagine when you allow development, residential, commercial development, land development to happen in a way that is environmentally degrading and results in more pollution and flooding runoff. You contaminate waterways, sometimes drinking water supplies, and you end up putting more people in the path of flooding, harming actual individuals, harming families, taking from them their homes and their histories, taking from the children their sense of safety, their mental sanity and sanctity, because they're literally losing their homes and they experience this fear of flooding and rising floodwaters, and it's just so traumatic. But once the floodwaters have passed and you've inflicted all that harm, sometimes even subjecting some people to death. I mean, people die during floods, but then you have all of this harm that has to be paid for. Who pays for it? To some degree, it gets paid for by the individual homeowners, but for the most part, it gets paid for by the community, helping people to restore and rebuild their lives. That is very, very costly. There are a lot of health harms that result in the end, and that also, unfortunately, ends up falling on the community. When you talk about industrial operations and pollution that degrade the environment, that pollute the water and pollute the air, you lose the people's health. Well, often the costs of helping respond to those health damages in significant part falls on the taxpayers and on the communities. But not only do you have those costs, but you also have people who are now unable to go to work. And so that the businesses they work for get impacted because their workers are unable to show up because they're suffering from the health harms of whatever pollution or industry has happened. So you can see there are costs and there are missed economic opportunities. When you support the economic development or development in a way that protects the environment, not only do you just create jobs in those industries, but you create new jobs. So you mentioned ecotourism. Ecotourism is a tremendous job creator in so many communities, you know, along the Delaware River and in watersheds across our nation. There are so many jobs that are dependent upon people being able to come out and get access to healthy nature. The canoe liveries that are putting people out on the water, the people who are taking, the trekkers who are taking people on their marches, the people who are selling them the equipment or their lunches, right? So there's tremendous economic development and growth that comes from a variety of streams from protecting the environment. In the state of New York, you actually have protecting the environment has meant that the people of New York City have some of the best drinking water that exists in the nation without having to invest $10 to $20 billion in a water treatment system. Instead, they have invested much lesser funds, you know, millions of dollars in protecting the healthy environment that supports human health and quality of life and ecotourism, but at the same time preserves best quality water at lower cost for the people of New York City. And finally, like there are so many strands, but finally, for the industries themselves, for the developers themselves, very often doing things the right way actually is economically more beneficial for them. When you have a residential developer, for example, who pursues their residential development in a way that is more environmentally protective, they actually save money on the development front. And they end up creating projects that are more desirable, that they can sell more quickly for a higher price value at the end. So they make more money more quickly on the back end, right? And I can go on and on pretty much on every front when you look at it from a community perspective. Pursuing your economic development in a way that is environmentally friendly saves money and makes money for the businesses themselves, creates jobs, saves money, makes money for the community as a whole. And we all have the joy of a healthy environment and all of the health and quality of life benefits that provides. So it's a whole big line of discussion, but all the way around, it is a win-win-win-win-win-win-win when you do it the environmental way.
Love it. How much sense that makes. How efficient and from the economic and environmental perspective. So I'm wondering, how does the Green Amendment relate to the Green New Deal?
So they're dramatically different. And if you ask me, the Green Amendment is far more powerful. But there's synergies. So the Green Amendment is about taking the highest law on the land at the state level and then ultimately at the federal level, the Bill of Rights section of our constitutions, and using it to create an enforceable constitutional legal right that protects all people and their environmental rights. It is very powerful. It shifts government decision-making so that it is not about managing harm, but it's about preventing harm. It's not about managing environmental racism. It's about preventing environmental racism and creating true environmental justice. So all the way around, it is transformational from an advocacy perspective, as well as a legal perspective and a public policy and a political decision-making perspective. In terms of the Green New Deal, that is a very powerful, positive vision for change, which talks about putting in place programs and initiatives and funding opportunities that are about advancing clean energy and social justice reforms and environmental protections. It is a vision for change that requires a lot of pathways of implementation including passage of laws, creation of policies and programs, finding funding streams and investing them in environmentally protective ways and ways that are good for social justice. So one's a grand vision. The other is about, it is a grand vision, but it is about taking the highest law in the land and using it in a powerful, enforceable, inspirational way to actually, literally, on the ground, give and protect the people of our nation and future generations the right to pure water, clean air, a stable climate, and a healthy environment.
I am so excited. So another question is, if the international stage can push environmental protection as a human right, then it would be more than reasonable for the United States to follow suit. What are the main challenges the Green Amendment faces currently?
So, you know, on the international front, you actually have some of the same kinds of problems that you have here on the national front. You have a lot of people with a lot of vision. You have a lot of good language. Some nations have done it right and do it well in terms of recognizing and protecting environmental rights, and some have good, pretty language that hasn't really resulted in transformational change. And that's what we have here in the United States of America. We have 2 states that have done the right language in the right placement in their constitutions, and so really have resulted in creating a transformational pathway for change. And then you have a boatload of other states, the majority of which have pretty language, but hasn't resulted in that change. But if they got on the path of the 2, of Pennsylvania and Montana, right, we could have green amendments in every nation. And so I just like to be clear, it's not that actually internationally they do it so much better than here in the United States, right? There's kind of a parallel there. But to the extent Pennsylvania and Montana and nations like Ecuador are recognizing the power and importance of protecting environmental rights as true human rights in an enforceable way, there's inspiration, and we need to get on that path in all of our states and nationwide. And that will not only help the people in our nation, but of course, enhance protections for the whole world, because the climate crisis is impacting all of us.
That's right, and we're certainly doing our part to contribute to it. So quick question on that topic. How can people take action in their communities wherever they are in the United States of America?
So we have a lot of different actions and activities happening when it comes to the Green Amendment movement. We have the 2 states that have Green Amendments, and there the focus is on proper implementation. We actually have 6 states where we've already inspired Green Amendment proposals: New York, New Jersey, Maryland, West Virginia, Vermont, and just the few weeks ago, the state of New Mexico. We're anticipating green amendments in Maine, Oregon, and Washington in the coming weeks, and we have more and more states where there's growing interest all the time. So if people go to our website at forthegenerations.org, they can see where their state is at on this spectrum of activity and work to get involved, learn how to get involved. And if your state doesn't have a page on our website, it means that nothing really significant is happening there yet. And maybe you can be the one to inspire the change to be brought to your state. Frankly, one of our most powerful movements is happening in the state of New Mexico. Tremendous energy and passion for passing a green amendment in New Mexico. And that entire process started because one person heard me on a show like this and picked up the phone and called me, and we talked, and we were off to the races.
It's a beautiful thing. And in that case, knowledge really can be very, very powerful. And that's a great example. So I want to read you a quote and then ask you a question. So this is something that I saw yesterday from an Antiques Roadshow episode.
Uh-oh, I hope somebody else has the quote.
I have it as well. So I can
Am I
read
back?
it. Oh, you're back, Rachel. Yeah, go for
Okay.
it.
I'm figuring it out. I'm smarter than the computer. Sorry for my unstable connection. But okay, so here's the quote. "Joy and relief make themselves felt. So too, music has the power to ease tension within the heart and to loosen the grip of obscure emotions. The enthusiasm of the heart expresses itself involuntarily, in a burst of song, in dance, and rhythmic movement of the body. From immemorial times, the inspiring effect of the invisible sound that moves all hearts and draws them together has mystified mankind. That's from I Ching. So you see the need to empower young people to speak for themselves. So do I. So I want you to think about taking into consideration Green Amendments for the Generations just had an art-focused fundraiser, which we as Water Spirit loved, and again, just see such an opportunity for not just Mark Ruffalo, although he's been great, but celebrities, artists, and musicians en masse in every state can now not only join the Green Amendment movement, but with the eyeballs and megaphones they have, they can heed the clarion call for youth and future generations that they require right now. So can you please talk about the great opportunity for the wider arts community to partake in the Green Amendment movement at this time?
So there is a place and space for everybody in the Green Amendment movement, and it really has to be about all of us coming together. It is a simple concept that people can really grab a hold of and be inspired by, but the truth is it's rather complex to implement. And so the one thing I really urge people is, if you're inspired, please don't try to go off and do it on your own, because there are 46 states that already did that over the last couple of decades, and they all got it wrong. Only 2 states got it right. So please join with Green Amendments for the Generations. Join with me, Maya Van Rossum, in partnership. Let me bring to you my knowledge and experience, and then you bring to the movement all of your talents and dedication and the relationships that you have in your state, and let's work in partnership. I think that art has an amazing place in protecting the environment. It is powerful and important to talk about facts and figures, right? And to make your case intellectually. But it is so incredibly, irreplaceably powerful to have the arts join in the delivery of the message. Art has such an amazing way, like the visual arts, of taking a really complex message about the importance of clean water, and rather than having lots of facts and figures about how it impacts people or it benefits people economically or otherwise, just with one visual delivering that message. Or when you are speaking and testifying and trying to advance an environmental cause, and everybody's going up and again bringing forth all the important intellectual information, but then having that one person come up to the microphone or the podium and read a poem that they wrote or sing a song. There's just such a powerful, different connecting way that the message gets delivered. And it is truly irreplaceable. And I find in the environmental movement, so often it is very clear that the message in that art, the language in that art, whether it's visual language or words or sounds, you can tell that it is a message that actually emanated from nature itself, right? That those people heard a message from nature and have found a way through their art to bring it into our human world and help connect nature with the hearts and the minds of the decision makers who we're trying to persuade. And it's just irreplaceably, powerfully important. Again, it's not going to do it on its own. The facts and the figures aren't going to do it on their own. The tears aren't enough. The anger is not enough. The straight monotone intellect is not enough. It's not enough to have the young people. It's not enough to have the older people. It's not enough to have the indigenous people, the white people, the black people, the brown people, right? It's not enough to have just one or the other. We need to have them all. That is the power of, amongst other things, that is part of the power of the Green Amendment movement, because whatever your community, whatever part of nature you care about or you rely upon or you need addressed, like whatever it is, whatever drives you in your environmental work and advocacy, the Green Amendment will help advance it. And so it is actually it's a beautiful part of, the ball of the earth that brings us all together in common cause. to seek and secure true environmental rights for all people. And I just want to say that a lot of people want to see rights of nature in green amendments, and I respect that and I appreciate that and I hear that. But I believe that we accomplish better empowering nature by using the Constitution, which fundamentally is about the relationship between people and their government, and just sort of reconstituting it and reformulating it so it's focused on environmental rights. And by bringing that incredible new power and strength to the environmental movement, that transformational change, we fundamentally are raising the bar for nature itself. So I do want to say that, but I talk with people a lot about the connection between the rights of nature and constitutional environmental rights, and there's a powerful connectivity there as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I grew up skiing on the Catskill Mountains every winter and spending summers in Milford, Pennsylvania. So those parts of this part of the region, this region, are very special to me. And so I love to hear you call New York's watershed the champagne of water. And again, this is part of Maya's book, so please read it. And I just wanted to, my last question, then I'll open it up for everybody else. Thank you again. You are working with your daughter and other young leaders at Green Amendments for the Generations. So what is it like working with these new leaders?
Oh my gosh, they're so phenomenal. But you know what? The truth is, they're not phenomenal because they're young. They're phenomenal because they're phenomenal, right? Like I really, I tend to have kind of blinders. Truthfully, everybody's gonna laugh, but I really am the youngest person in the room. So I don't care what room I am. I'm usually in my own heart, I'm the youngest one there. So, but with all the different kinds of people I get to work with, I mean, it is just amazing, the energy and the power, and how all the different environmental activists that are coming to this cause, like what they bring to it, the power, the passion, the energy. And it really has nothing to do with age. It's very clear. I can see it. The ones that really shine through most powerfully are people who have a genuine connectivity with nature. And it doesn't mean that they're people that are out in the woods all the time. You don't have to be. There are a lot of, really powerful people who are grounded in urban nature, right? Their relationship is different, but there is a very personal relationship that they have developed with nature, and it just shines through. So for me, it's about the person. And I just get, it's just such a joy. And as the Delaware Riverkeeper, I've worked with so many powerful advocates for nearly 3 decades now, in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. Through the Green Amendment movement, I'm now, also going to other states like New Mexico and Oregon and Washington and Maine. And it's interesting how the different personalities of the different states really shines through the people. And I can also see that in large part, that different personality comes from the different nature that they are in, right? Like the different natural landscapes that they are connecting with. So it's quite it's just a true honor for me to be able to do this work, to be able to work every single day for Mother Earth is just a joy and an honor, and very humbling. And on my worst days, if I'm having a bad day, I just remind myself what an honor it is and how much I love my life. And immediately, all that negativity just sort of floats away, because I'm honored and I'm humbled.
It really comes through, Maya. And for those of you who don't know, Maya signs all of her emails smiling, and we really do feel your smiles. So keep doing that. I appreciate that, and I'm sure everybody else does too. At this point, I'd love to open it up for questions and answers. If anyone has a question, go ahead, Blair.
got a question building on what you just told us, Maya, and taking advantage of the intimacy of the Zoom format where we get to even come over to your house tonight. As a long-term environmental advocate who has experienced some tremendous successes, and I'm sure some big setbacks as well, which is just the nature of this kind of work, I'd be curious to hear, in addition to intentionally practicing gratitude, what some of your strategies are for cultivating personal resilience to be able to do this work for the long term and not burn out.
I'm not good at that. The personal recognition of the honor and the joy, I really do feel so grateful. So that is very important for me. The one other thing that I do, which is very important for me and to me, is before I do a talk like this, before I testify at a hearing, before I speak at a protest, I make a point of going out and physically connecting with nature. Maybe it's putting my hand, I pull off to the side of the road and I run down, I put my hand in the water of the river or the creek, or I go out and I literally kiss and hug a tree. You know, I'm sure I'm walking down Philadelphia. I have had the honor numerous times of being interviewed at the WHYY, NPR studios in Philadelphia, where they do radio. And I'm walking down the road and, there are the city trees and I hear them and feel them speaking to me. And so I have to stop and give them a kiss or touch them. And so to me, that helps me make sure that I am always reminded that it's not about me, that I am honored to do this work, but I'm not doing this work for me. I'm doing this work for nature. And the day I walk into the room and it becomes about Maya and Maya's ego and Maya getting, kudos or I don't know, whatever it is, that's the day I need to stop, because I'm not doing my duty for the earth, right? To do environmental advocacy, to do this work, to be chased around your card, which I have, to be booed at and jeered at, to be punched as you're on your way up or down the aisle to testify, to have horrifying things said about you in the press and threats made towards you and your family. Like you have to have a deep love of the earth. You have to have a deep love of people. But I just like to be honest, you have to have a level of ego. It's true. But the most important thing to be a good advocate in my mind, one of the most important things, is you always have to check your ego at the door and make sure you remind yourself that it is not about you, that it is about nature, who can't be in the room speaking unless you speak for nature, which means you have to say the words nature needs said, not the words that you once said that are going to get you kudos or whatever it is, will feed your ego. And I think it's also really important to be honest about that, to be honest about the ego thing. So I think a lot of people like to pretend like, oh, no, you have to be honest, right? You always have to be honest. So I do the connect with nature. And then other than that, I'm really bad. I work all the time. I find it very hard to say no. When something has to be done and I feel like the people that work with me are already overloaded, even though I'm overloaded, I load it on because I just feel it's important. So I work pretty much every day, every holiday. When I had COVID, I was sitting on the couch working, but that's okay. That's hard. You can ask people who work with me. That's hard on me, but what's my other option? To sit down and shut up? To let the other side win? To not take on that critical issue in that critical moment when there's an opportunity for success? That's just laying down and giving up, and that's betraying my duty to Mother Earth and to people. So that's a non-option. So I'm not good at the caring for yourself, but I really believe in caring for the earth or myself. I'll care for you.
Thank you so much.
And just so you know, we do have a weekly, consistently weekly, free meditation for Earth every Tuesday at 12:15 Eastern Standard Time. Please do take some time. That is broadcast from Hawaii, from my colleague Abby. So just so you know, and we'll share that with everyone again. But there was a question from Laura, so I just wanted to make sure that we ask that. So Montana Supreme Court, their recent decision regarding mining activities near Yellowstone. Could you please discuss the role of the Green Amendment in that case, I guess, as it would relate?
Yeah, so so recently, there have been a couple of layers, and it finally came out of the Montana Supreme Court, but there has been an ongoing battle about the advancement of gold mining operations in an incredibly important natural area, an area that in many parts is untouched by or rarely touched by human hands and human activity. A lot of wildlife, a lot of beautiful forests, you know, the Yellowstone River. And there has been a battle over whether or not to allow exploratory mining operations that would ultimately end up opening up the area to gold mining. The permit was challenged by some wonderful environmental activists in Montana, and in very significant part, their challenge relied upon the Montana Green Amendment. And they were really challenging two things. They were challenging the permit that was issued for the gold mining operations, and they were challenging the law that the state relied upon to issue that permit. And long story short, because of Montana's Green Amendment, there was a constitutional finding with regards to that law, and there was a constitutional finding as pertains to that permit, and that permit ended up being rescinded or voided. And so that's actually the second example in Montana where the Green Amendment ultimately ended up voiding a permit for devastating gold mining operations. So it was really powerful, irreplaceable role.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that example and for that great question, Laura. Does anybody else have any questions for Maya?
And while we're waiting, because people do want to know how a Green Amendment makes a difference. So that was a really great example in Montana. There's another example in Montana where drinking water supplies were protected from government having to enforce exploratory drilling for drinking water that could have potentially exposed an entire town's drinking water supply to toxic contamination. And because of the Green Amendment, they didn't have to enforce the deal that would have resulted in that. In Pennsylvania, the Green Amendment, we used it successfully to challenge and defeat as unconstitutional and excruciatingly pro-fracking state law. Fracking is happening in Pennsylvania, but this law would have magnified it exponentially in devastating ways. And so we got the law declared unconstitutional. The law, Pennsylvania's Green Amendment, has been used to prevent the misappropriation of environmental protection funds, rather than allow them to be used to fill a gap in the general operating budget, to force them to be used for natural resources protection. We are using the Green Amendment right now to secure cleanup of a long ignored toxic site, a site super saturated with trichloroethylene. And it's being used in so many ways to challenge laws and regulations and permits, and as you heard, funding, but also to challenge, like in the case of that toxic site, the failure of government to act in critical ways to protect the environment and environmental rights.
Awesome. Very clear examples. And may there be so many more.
And if people go to the forthegenerations.org website, FOR, there is a resources page. And actually, that's how I spent my COVID-induced end of year holidays, was finally taking the time to write up a bunch of those successes. And so you can actually go to that page and you can see all these different write-ups giving a lot of different kinds of examples of how Pennsylvania and Montana's Green Amendment have been used and are being used to really protect natural resources, environmental rights, and people.
Awesome. And I just put the link in the chat. We are all glad you're feeling better, and we hope your family stays healthy. Please be careful, everybody. But yeah, if there's anything else you'd like to say, or anybody has any last minute questions, now's the time.
So while we're waiting, I just want to say again, I want to really thank Water Spirit for your incredible dedication to the earth and helping me to spread this word, and for your involvement in the Green Amendment movement, because you're becoming a powerful force in that movement in multiple states. And I'm really grateful. And by the way, in Hawaii, we're talking with people about advancing a Green Amendment in Hawaii. So if you're in Hawaii, that's good. But I really, I think that there are many, many important and powerful things that need to be done to protect our environment and our natural resources. But I also know that people have a lot that they have to do in their lives, and it's hard, it's hard to take everything on. So I would just say, if there was one thing that you had time for, I would really encourage you to think about being involved in the Green Amendment movement, because this provides the kind of transformational change that will provide broad brush, powerful, irrefutable, irrevocable protection for communities, for our environment, for environmental justice, and for both present and future generations. So I have been doing environmental advocacy and litigation for nearly 3 decades. And it is as a result of that work, and I still do that work. It's all powerful and important, but it's as a result of that work that I've come to this place to realize and recognize that our current system of government and laws are fundamentally failing us, and we need a better path. We need a new path. And I really, really believe that this path is a powerful part of the solution.
Thank you so much, Maya. And I so appreciate that, especially as someone who was pregnant basically when I started working with you years ago to help protect the Delaware. And as someone who is frankly very frustrated, even as a student, looking at all of our existing laws and seeing that they were all failing, and just seeing the opportunity for economic revitalization in this country. So I so appreciate your taking the initiative, starting this organization and leading, and I hope to help, in every way we can, get this passed in every single state and at the federal level by educating as many communities as we can. So thank you so much for this work and for creating it.
Yeah. Well, us working together, right? That's what's going to make it happen. It's never one person. One person can make a powerful difference. I don't want people to forget that, right? One person really can make a powerful difference. But for this kind of change, right, it's us working together. And you have been so important and so engaged, and you and Blair, and being part of our Green Amendment leadership training, and now being at the forefront of advancing, New Jersey's Green Amendment. I mean, it's just really powerful. And I'm just so grateful for the partnership, because I learn as much from you as I hope you learn from me. It's about all of us doing it together.
Hear, hear. Thank you so much again, everyone, for joining. And again, to Maya, thank you.
Thank you. Have a great night,
Have a great
everybody.
night.